Starting with Benny Smith and working your way down the table, can you please introduce yourself, when you were drafted, where you served, and tell us just a little bit about yourself and your time in the service?
Well, I'm a poor one to get started, but started off I was 18 years old when I was in 1944 in December, and they gave me a deferment to finish high school, and that 6 months helped me all the way through. And I was inducted into the Army in Leavenworth, and the same week that I was inducted, the Germans surrendered. And then I went to Texas, and we had training, and was in training about 3 months, and we were training to invasion of Japan. And then they dropped atomic bomb. So that let me out again. And then after 3 more months of training, they shipped me to California and kept me for about 5 days at Oakland. And then they put me on a troop train and sent me to New Jersey. And then we went down the Hudson River and boarded a ship there at New York, and we sailed across the Atlantic, and we landed in Le Havre, France, and there they loaded us up on boxcars, which was 40 and 8. I guess they called it, they were 40 men or 8 mules, they said. So in south of Munich is where I finally ended up in a machine record department, and that was IBM machines, and we kept records of the European theater of the troops over there, and it was really interesting. And then as the troops come home, they just kind of phased each one of there were 3 units in the European theater, and they just kind of phased them out as the troops went home. So I actually got to come home early, and I come home and got discharged in Chicago, and that was about the end of my journey. I did an awful lot of traveling. I guess that's it, Bill.
That's it? Do I get to go ahead then?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was in high school when this war was going on, and I was 17, a junior, 17 years old, and there's a lot of boys getting killed over there. And I got to school late one day, and my sister was in the study hall. She was crying, and she says, I went in there and I says, how come that you're crying? She says, well, the superintendent said we got to school on time, we wouldn't have to worry about it. And I said, well, we drove in mud and we couldn't get to school. And so I went into the superintendent and I said, there's not enough room in here for you and me both. I says, I'm leaving. And I went home and helped my dad shuck corn, and I said, I'm joining the Navy. And it was 1945, and everybody was getting killed, so I thought, well, I'm going to go over and help out any way I can. And so I went to boot camp at Great Lakes, and I stayed there for about, I'd have 7 weeks, I guess, and then I went out to Seattle and on a train and got on an aircraft, or a battleship, the battleship Maryland, and we started down the coast. We were going to go to Japan and blow up Japan, and on the way down the coast, Japan surrendered. So we went to Hawaii, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and 3 or 4 of us, they put us on a little LSD, a landing ship dock, is what they called it, and sent us over to Okinawa. And that was a 2-week trip over there from Hawaii. And we got to Okinawa, and it was raining, and it was dark, and they unloaded us on a little landing craft, and we went ashore, and a truck picked us up and drove us up in the mud up the hill a ways and said, "This as far as you go and get out." So I throwed my bag over the side and jumped out, and I jumped in a foot of water. And then we went up into a tent, and it was just covered with tents, the Navy base there. And I sat in the tent there and spent the night, and then the next day, we got things straightened up pretty good, and then went along a few days, and we had a typhoon come up. And what do you think when a typhoon comes up? It blew all our tents away. And there we were with no tents, and a lot of them got in some of these old places where they buried the dead, in some kind of a tomb. They'd crawl in there to get out of the weather. And me and another guy started crawling up where a Quonset hut was put up, and we crawled up through the mud about a quarter of a mile, about 3 feet high, as high as you could get without blowing away. And we got up there and got inside the Quonset hut, and you couldn't get your way in there because everybody was in there, and the mud was 6 inches deep. And so we got through that storm, and then a few days later I was up at the north end of the base getting some new clothes issued with 3 or 4 guys, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and we heard a terrible explosion down where our tent was, down south end of the camp. And so we run down there and got down there, and there was a guy laying dead right beside our tent. And I thought, what's going on here? And I looked down in the lower part of the camp, and the whole camp was blown away again. And we found out later that a guy was trying to fry a chicken by a dynamite dump and blew the dynamite dump up. And there was just ambulances coming up from every base there was, just coming in there and so what did I do? I went down and helped move the other dynamite out. I didn't know any better. And then I just worked around and worked on Okinawa and hauled garbage for a lot of people. And when we'd take a garbage truck out, we'd haul a whole load of it, and from 3,000 men, and then we'd dump it out in the garbage pit. And finally we got the natives to do that, so all we had to do is go along and watch them do the work, and then we took it back and washed out the cans, and then we did as we pleased. And so I sat there about a year, and I finally got to be a petty officer, and then I got to work for the electrical department, so I got out of that business. But then later on we just kind of come home. That was it. Okay.
You're through, huh? I'm Francis Runyon, and I served in the Navy. I went in September of 1946 and got out, or no. Better forget that. That was way too late. Anyway, I served in the Western Pacific aboard an amphibious attack transport. We carried troops in and dropped them off ashore in an invasion. I was involved with the Battle of Okinawa. I got there 2 or 3 weeks after they had invaded it, but there was still lots of fighting, and that's when the days of the kamikaze planes were flying the heaviest, I guess, and we survived it. We air raids all the time and at night, and one thing about, well, it was along toward the latter part of the war. We were in San Francisco Bay, tied up to a dock, and we were in the process of, as they call, casting off the lines to ship out to the Pacific again when the whistles went off in San Francisco. And the Japanese had surrendered after 2 A-bombs had been dropped on them. And so our ship is in the records as being the first one out of San Francisco Bay and under the Golden Gate Bridge in peacetime. And I was noticing that, in the celebration of the Royals down there, you know, and all the mob that was in front of Union Station, that made me remember that it was in Union Station where I was inducted into the Navy. And right after our induction, we boarded the train and headed for Farragut, Idaho. So I was in till June of 1946, and I had dropped out of school. I turned 18 and had a year to finish of high school, and they told, well, I had a draft deferment, you know, working on a farm, and they let me stay till the next summer, and then I got drafted anyway. But then served out in the Pacific and till war was over and we began bringing troops home. After the Japanese surrendered, we were involved in landing the initial occupation troops of northern Japan. And after that, then we had, they called it the magic carpet. We started bringing servicemen home that had served their time and they were about to get out. And I got discharged at Great Lakes, Illinois, and then came home and went back to high school and finished, and then went to college. And that's enough, I guess, of that.
My story will be a little different. I enlisted in the Signal Corps in September of 1942 with the promise that I could be, if I could pass the entrance exams, which I did fairly well, and they would send me to school for 9 months, teach me how to repair radios and take the Morse code. I thought, well, that's a good deal, because by 9 months this war will be over. Guess what? Took another 3 years. But anyway, I did went through the schooling at Kansas City and got my degree in radio repair and in Morse code. I could copy 40, 50 words a minute in Morse code, which was pretty good. But I wanted to stay with the radio repair if I could. But anyway, after we got through that, about 9 months down there in Kansas City, they shipped us to Sacramento, California, Camp Kohler, for further training in Signal Corps, message receiving, message sending, and I got to this point where I got a high-speed operator's spec number. Well, I wasn't too proud of that because I wanted to stay with radio repair. But anyway, after we'd been there for about, let's see, that was about 6, 7 months, then we shipped overseas, starting well, we left from Pittsburgh, California, and when we got to the Golden Gate Bridge, I was feeding the fish. If you know what that means. I was so blooming seasick I couldn't care what was going on. On about the third day, I got over that all right, and we spent the next about 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, zigzagging course. We were by ourselves with no escort, and ended up in New Caledonia. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't leaving New Caledonia. We went over there with about 150 or 200 of us Signal Corps guys that were going to be placed somewhere in the Pacific. And there was 3 of us. 3 of us were left on New Caledonia for some unknown reason. We couldn't figure out what was going on. But we had to sit out there for about almost 6 weeks until we could be assigned to an outfit. And turned out that the outfit we were going to join was the 112th Signal Radio Intelligence Company. And we all had to have clearance, security clearance, before we could get into this outfit. Pretty elite group. If I have to do a little bragging here, I will. I'll just brag about them a little bit. We were a pretty high class outfit, a good bunch of guys. And when I finally got my orders to ship out, I joined the outfit on Bougainville. They had been there about 4 weeks. Anyway, we got shelled pretty good. Sorry. And lost a few people. And but we got right back to work and set up our operation and copied the Japanese. We copied Japanese code, the Army and Navy messages. I think we copied probably everything that they ever transmitted. We probably received, because we had 150 radios that 4 of us guys were maintaining, and kept them. We had to keep them hot 24 hours a day, copying Japanese messages. And we didn't falter. We kept on copying no matter what happened. We had to be, I guess I'd have to add this, we had to be in a combat zone. Not necessarily involved fully in combat, but we were in a combat zone the whole time we were overseas. That was the nature of our operation. We would copy the Japanese messages and locate their positions of their radios. We had direction finders that we could triangulate. You know what triangulation means. We could triangulate in on their radio stations, and occasionally we'd send an airplane out there to bomb them. And all of a sudden, the guys in the operating room would get a signal, air raid, and they'd go off the air, and that'd be the last we'd hear of them. But we've done a lot of good for the military. We were credited with. I don't really swallow this completely, but if we were that important over there, then we saved an awful lot of lives. We were credited, or a couple of the generals over there said that the information that we gathered of the Navy and the Army and the Air Force shortened the war by at least 90 days. And if we done that, then we done our share. That would be a lot of lives saved, wouldn't it? You know, 90 days of wartime. You never thought about that when we got the citation that we had done this, but apparently we did. And another silly thing, kind of a crazy operation. This was on the. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get to the Philippines before I mention this. We left Bougainville in December of 1943 and ended up in Luzon, Lingayen Gulf, Luzon, Philippines. There was 100 of us, about a third, hardly a third. Our company was 250 men strong. When we were at full force, we were 250 people. But there was 100 of us that went to Luzon, and we were to go up there and set up our operation and start working. Well, we ended up going in on the third wave of troops. Our ship that was carrying our supplies had hit a coral reef off the coast of Australia and was disabled for about 30 to 60 days. So we were late getting started in our operation, so we done other work up there. Where the first week we unloaded ships, supplies for the 37th Division and for some of the other operations that were there also. under fire for a few days. Kind of on the way up there, we were, the night before we got to the Philippines, you heard Francis tell about the kamikazes. We had one aimed right smack at our ship. And the gunners on the destroyer escort that was with us opened up with their .50 calibers. When they do that, you know they're pretty close. That's the last desperate attempt. And they knocked this kamikaze, veered him off a little bit. And the captain of our ship, when it was after we'd hit the ocean and felt the blast, the captain came on and says, "We've been spared." He missed us by 30 yards. I thought, gee, that's quite a distance. You know, but that's only 90 feet. And in the meantime, we was on an Australian ship, and we didn't have these Mae West lifeguard things, belts, that you could just press a button and they'd inflate. We had to blow them up ourselves. And I had mine so blooming tight. I was about to choke. And anyway, it was a kind of relief when he said we had missed by 30 yards. Then we went on in. But we did. We hit there on the third wave. Not too much activity. I'll tell you another kind of an odd, crazy thing that happened on the beach. We landed on Crimson 1, and the first casualty on Crimson 1 was by a water buffalo. He got excited and charged the BAR team and killed one of the BAR people. Needless to say, the guy that was carrying the gun mowed him down. And then that was one of those queer things. And then another crazy one that kind of scares you after you think about it. We were dug in on the beach about I suppose maybe 100 yards inland. And the Japs came over, the first 2 or 3 nights we were on the beach. They came in with their airplanes and whatever to try to do a little damage, And of course, when they show up, the sky's full of anti-aircraft fire, ACAC. And what goes up comes down. All that shrapnel, just like a hailstorm where we were. And we had one kid sitting in his foxhole, and those Army fatigue jackets, they kind of stretch out their bag, and he was sitting there and kind of slumped over in his foxhole, and one of them pieces of shrapnel came down and stripped the buttons off the front of his jacket. He got back under his helmet pretty quick. Yeah, and we did, and another one good thing that I think that we done. I guess I should be proud of everything we done, but the guys in the operating room were supposed to, when the station went off of the air, they'd scan the dial looking for new stations, and this kid found something that didn't sound. It wasn't Japanese code. It wasn't our code. He couldn't figure out what it was. And we finally sent a message out to our DFs, our direction finders, and they triangulated and they found this message coming from a spot about 100 miles out in the ocean southwest of Manila. And of course we alerted the Navy, and they said, yeah, we should have a submarine out there somewhere. And sure enough, there was a submarine out there in distress, and would likely have gone down if this kid hadn't been scanning his dial at that particular time. What a coincidence, some of those kind of things happen. But anyway, to close off here, I've said about enough already. But to close out, we were anticipating a push on Japan. We had been issued some new equipment, quite a bit of new equipment, some new huts for our trucks to operate out of, and I had a lot of new test equipment in my shop. Everything we were ready for a big push on Japan. And I think it was on August the 9th. Am I right on that? Anybody know for sure? August the 9th, they dropped the first A-bomb.
I think so.
And of course, we got word of it right away. And we thought, well, now what in the world does that mean? Well, about a week later, they dropped the second one, and then we found out what it meant. It meant that Japan was going to be obliterated if they didn't close down. But we did. We had enough stuff on our island, there, actually on the Philippines, to probably blow the whole island of Japan up. Anyway, that was the end of the war. I stayed on a few months over there yet to close things out, get the equipment taken back down to Manila and destroyed, and then I could get to come home. Thank heavens for the A-bomb, but you know, I want to continue that a little bit. It used to bothered me like heck, that we, and still does at times, we are the only country in the world that has ever used an A-bomb. But if we hadn't, we would have leveled that island of Japan. We had enough, we had control of everything over there by that time. It would have been over with, no matter what. I'm gonna give up. Let LC do his story. He's got a bigger story than I did anyway.